I am Sherry Heller. I am representing the COE in this first second, and then I will be one of the presenters. So I'm double dutying here. But the Center of Excellence would like to welcome you, Center of Excellence on Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation, to our conference this year, Equity from the Start. As I said earlier, my name is Sherry Heller, and I will serve as the session facilitator as well as one of the presenters. This session is being recorded and transcription is available through the Zoom platform. And if you have any questions, please feel free to relay those in the chat. We are having space at the end, a little space at the end to answer any questions. And that's kind of the time we're going to use. But if you shoot something in the chat, we will try to handle it as we can. We also want to let you know that before we begin, the views, policies, and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect those of SAMHSA or HHS. And that being said, I'd like to pass it on to Evandra, who will be heading us off in this workshop.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. This is really a great moment and opportunity for us to come together as authors and again with you all in the field. So today's session is Advancing Anti-Bias Practice through Reflective Supervision. There's going to be 4 of us today. You'll hear from us each individually. And when you hear from each author, we will tell you about our organization and a little bit about ourselves. We are going to be moving quickly through this. As always, we only have 50 minutes to get through a lot. And so with that being said, just want to go over some of the learning objectives from today that I hope you all could, take away. And that will be that you'll learn about the core perspectives and processes of reflective supervision. You will learn how reflective supervisors can create spaces that challenge consultants' biases and assumptions. And then again, we'll learn 3 practical strategies for increasing consultants' awareness of bias in self and others. And so we just did the welcome. We heard from Sherry. We're going to go through each of the areas I mentioned just now in the objectives. So thinking about reflective supervision, embedding equity at the organizational level. And then there's going to be some findings shared at the end from the field consultants' voices about their experiences. We'll have a mock session to give you some opportunity to practice having a very difficult conversation, which we've heard that from the field quite a bit. And then we will wrap up. Today participating are 4 amazing organizations that really are bringing together this idea of research and evaluation, practice, and professional development as we meet and join with you all today and share this space. So I'm Dr. Evandra Catherine at the Children's Equity Project. We'll have Leah Eckley from the Southwest Human Development. We have Jordan Rand from the COE. And then, of course, we have Sherry Heller from the Reflective Supervision Collaborative. I would ask you to take like 2 seconds to take a picture of this slide with your phone if you can, because our email addresses are here and we're going to run up against the clock at the end. And you may have questions that you want to ask one of the authors. And this is the best way for you to capture that early in the session. So I'll give another second or 2 for you to grab a photo of this. And then I'm going to launch a poll here to find out who's in the room. And then we'll just continue on with how we're going. So polls. So I'm launching the first poll, and this is just to find out who's in the room. So what's your role? Try to pick one of those just to give us a sense of who's here. It looks like there's 124 participants in the room right now. We're excited about that. We're up at about 63 on the rolls. So I'll give it a couple more seconds here. Looks like we're at about 80% on the rolls. Almost at about 90. All righty, we're at 90%. So it looks like we mostly have mental health consultants in the room, which is awesome. Some early childhood education teachers, some trainers and coaches. And then for the rest of them, there's a little bit low. I think you might be able to see. Can you all see the results? So these are the results. Very, very exciting that 66% of you all are in mental health consultation, because the content from this session will probably be very relevant to the work and the roles that you do. So the next thing I'm going to do is there's another poll I want to ask. As I mentioned, we've heard from the field that there's been, a lot of talk about Black and brown boys and bias towards them. And this is being witnessed by consultants, by teachers. So just wanted to get a feel of that from you all. The question is, have you witnessed or experienced bias by teachers toward Black and brown boys? And we're at about 75% on the poll. Give it a little bit more time. The results would be as expected. So let's see, we'll let a couple more people answer. All right, we got about 90% on the poll. I'm going to end the poll and then share those results. So what is to be expected? As I mentioned, we've received this feedback for the field. We're going to give you some kind of opportunities today to think that through and have conversation around it. And hopefully this will be a safe enough space for us to be able to accomplish that. And then just lastly, one last poll. And the question here is, are you comfortable talking about bias towards Black and brown boys? So I imagine that we will probably see some similar results from this poll, as I mentioned, that we've heard from the field. Thank you all so much for participating. This is amazing, helpful information for us. It looks like on this poll, we're at about 84%. Going to give you a couple more seconds to give us an answer here. Okay, looks like 84 is where it's stopping at. So I'll stop it as well on my side and share those results out. So as you can see, about 55% of you are and 40% of you somewhat. And this is definitely what we expected to see here. So thank you all for being honest with us and sharing this experience and these answers. And it's going to really help us as we move forward. So thank you all very much. All righty. Well, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Sherry, from the Reflective Supervision Collaborative.
Okay, so I'm here and my role is director of the Reflective Supervision Collaborative. The collaborative is a training and consultation group, and the purpose is partnering with communities and organizations to enhance capacity to provide and sustain diversity, equity, and trauma-informed reflective supervision and practices across systems. And you'll see our faculty here pictured. I wish I could get a chance to introduce every one of them because it's an incredible group of people, but time will not allow for that. Next slide. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is what we call our Track 1 training, which is reflective supervision for the whole job. And it's built around a lot of the work done by Heffron and Murch in really recognizing that reflective supervision isn't just what you do in that hour, that it encompasses your whole job, that it involves your administrative work, that it involves helping your staff to reach benchmarks, as well as helping them to effectively work in the intervention and help them to kind of figure out how they are and who they are in the work. Right? So oftentimes we see these as separate roles, like reflective or administrative, and we really view these roles as having to be kind of merged together in order to do the best work possible. And that reflective supervision is kind of this relationship where you slow down, you listen, and you collaborate. So let's see. Next slide. So some of the, in the past slide, I forgot to say that the Track 1 training is 8 live virtual sessions that are 4 hours each. There's about 14 hours of offline work. And then also you break it out into smaller groups of about 8 people where you have 7 sessions just with what we call your mentoring circle, where you're able to think about and kind of really dive into the work a little bit deeper. Some of the unique features of our approach is that it's a whole job approach, as I mentioned earlier, that we've really infused into our framework, diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice as an important lens. We've infused a trauma-informed lens, that it's a true collaboration through reflective supervision leaders throughout the field who have come together to use their knowledge, expertise, and training materials to create this kind of cutting-edge training. We work really closely with our local sponsors, so you don't just hire us and we show up and do the training and leave. We really work to understand what our sponsors' needs are, what their hopes are, what the group that's coming in to be trained looks like, so we can make sure that the training is really meeting them where they are and really kind of approaching their needs. It's a very interactive training, and with the mentor circles, you really have an opportunity to integrate those concepts and practices. It was one of the things that when we came together as a group, we recognized that reflective supervision trainings done in just a weekend or just a couple of days and with no follow-up practice really doesn't help people to kind of implement reflective supervision at the level it needs to be implemented and to be successful and to feel confident about it. Hence this intensive training series we offer. Really quickly, next slide. This is a figure of our framework. You will notice the blue circles are what we call our perspectives. We feel like these are the lenses you need to wear all the time when you're considering the work that you're doing, when you're providing reflective supervision. These things impact how we are in the work, and these things need to be considered as we do the work. As I mentioned, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You need to consider systems and kind of where the systems are embedded. You need to be trauma informed and trauma aware for the people you're supervising, who oftentimes have their own traumas that they're dealing with, or maybe experiencing secondary trauma from the work that they do, as well as the clients you're working with. And then a developmental lens, not only child development, since many of us work with infant and children here, but where people are developmentally in their career or developmentally in their life. Those things can impact how they are viewing the world, and we need to keep them in mind when we're doing reflective supervision. The centerpiece is our core processes and procedure, our core processes of reflective supervision. So those are kind of what is happening during reflective supervision that we believe influence change. One of them represents relationships. So we talk about parallel process, the professional use of self. Another one is more kind of thinking and emotions. So that's mindfulness, self-compassion, and regulation. And another one is just our thoughts about how we are and who we are in the work. The orange squares on the outside just support the reality that what's happening in the outside world impacts how we are in the work we do, impacts the clients we're working with, even impacts our work environment. And so that we need to keep those four things in mind. Next slide. This is a quote from one of our participants. "I needed a framework, a touchstone, to be able to move my own practice forward. I feel like this course gave me that structure and created a vision of reflective supervision that is so rooted in DEI principles that I can carry it with me into all the realms I move through with wonder and curiosity." This next slide breaks down those pink circles. So we had the three wedges. One was interactional awareness, one was emotional awareness, and one was cognitive awareness. And those all processes fit into those areas. Next slide. The center of our framework, that center circle, was critical self-reflection. This is based on a lot of the work done by Carmen Rosa Nerona, who we are fortunate enough to have as one of our faculty members. And we talk in depth about, and we do lots of exercises and practices about how to develop critical self-reflection. We've shifted it from just self-reflection to add that critical component, because it's not, because you need to kind of ask and consider how your own history, how your own beliefs and biases might be impacting the situation, the intervention, how you're coming to the work. And this is an activity we do to help people go deeper into that. Next slide, I'm going to be presenting data on our first 4 cohorts. The states in green were states that participated in these first 4 cohorts. Of the 126 people who signed up through these cohorts, 118 completed the training. So we had 93% retention, which we think is really good for such an intensive training. The data we presented in the beginning, it's 126 participants, and then as time goes by, that drops. It was mostly female group, mostly white, with the second highest population being Black and then Hispanic. And then we break down into just 2% increments of Indigenous, Asian, Middle Eastern or Northern African, and Hawaii or Pacific Islander. Next slide talks a little bit about some more of our demographics. Most were English speakers. 99% had some college. 60% of that was master's or higher. The majority had received reflective supervision. Half had provided reflective supervision. And then the breakdown of their professional roles was pretty nice and even. Administrative leadership, early childhood education, mental health clinician, early interventionist, home visitor, and then mental health consultant. This is the data that we asked about right after each of the 8 blocks. And so this is an average across the 8 blocks. Everybody, the ratings were agree or strongly agree on all of these different variables. If you click one more time, Evandra, I just want to highlight that they agreed the opportunity to reflect on race and culture and how it intersects with this work was an agree. And so we were really pleased to find that out when we were really looking from a DEI perspective. Next quote, I think, captures a lot of what we heard from our participants. This course encouraged me to consider areas such as power differentials that may impact the supervisory relationship. I appreciate the facilitators and the coursework for helping me to expand my knowledge and reflection about who I am as a person and how I may show up to others. Next slide. This is just the satisfaction items that they really felt that the training was good and helped them do what it needed to do. Again, our average scores were agree. This is a sum of all 8 modules. Next slide. This had to do with items that were specific to how it helped the individual increase their reflective supervisor skills. And we scored an average of very much. Across all of them, and their abilities to just increase their reflective capacity, their confidence, their practical skills. So we were extremely pleased with that. Next slide, and this quote captures that. How do I even describe this? The support from the beginning to end has been incredible. I feel grateful for all the information and time for discussions. This has truly helped develop my work to the next level. And then finally, we had a set of items that we asked after the entire track was completed, just like those reflective supervision items. They were done at the end of the entire course. These focus specifically on diversity, equity, inclusion items. And again, it was extreme to very much that the participants felt that diversity was presented in a way that it was valued, that it was an awareness of social justice was shown, that there was an opportunity to reflect on how race and culture intersect with my work, that we acted respectfully in cross-cultural situations, that the trainer showed awareness of within group differences, and that the trainers promoted open discussion. When all of this data that I'm presenting to you, we looked at the demographic variables, and there were no differences when we looked across the demographic variables, when we looked at the race variables, and when we there were a couple of differences on age in some of the earlier ones and experience level, but none of the diversity, equity, or inclusion type items did we see any differences in demographics. And then our last quote, I love the course. I really love the mentoring circles because we were with our cohorts and they grew with us. We got comfortable and were able to begin opening up and helping each other through our own personal issues with management. I also enjoyed the anti-racist readings. Being Black, I feel like living it is enough, but reading about how to put it into words, what it is that I needed was amazing. It is not enough to just say I am not racist. I need to see allies becoming anti-racist. That was such a wonderful aha. Next slide. This just offers some of the other trainings that you can also go to our website to see in more detail if you're interested in. And then this last slide is just acknowledging that we are actually a program that is now currently housed at Southwest Human Development, that our funding, much of our funding comes from Perigee, and then that's how you can find out more information about us. And I pass it on.
thank you so much. There was a question in the chat, Sherry, about how can they sign up. I believe you mentioned the website, and maybe perhaps they could send you an email to follow up on that conversation. So we are reading the chat, but we are trying to get through time. So we will pass it on over to Leah Eckley.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Leah Eckley. I work in Arizona at Southwest Human Development, which is a large nonprofit. We have about 830 employees. And then I support our mental health consultation program, which at the moment has about 60 employees, about 30, probably 42 to 43 mental health consultants working all over Arizona, providing mental health consultation. Next slide. And so here's a little bit more information about our program. We do serve all areas, tribal, rural, and urban, although, of course, our biggest areas is the Phoenix Metropolitan and the Tucson Metropolitan, but there is services clear across the state. We started in 2010, and we've been going strong. Some years we have more funding than other years, but we have had solid funding since 2010. At the moment, we have the most we've ever had with ARPA funding, but that'll be decreasing come July. So we're anticipating what will happen then, but we still will have a solid group of consultants working. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we prepare our workforce and try to center them around equity and think about reflective supervision as a tool to advance equity. So at the program level with our mental health consultants, we have a year-long program and we call it Consult U. And it's a training program to help support our new employees. And as part of that, we embed reflective capacity. We train about reflective supervision, and we certainly try to embed equity in each of the sessions. We also have a strong reflective supervision model within the program and within the agency too. So with support from our larger agency of Southwest Human Development, each of our consultants and supervisors and managers all the way up, to the director level receive weekly supervision. With the consultants, this is really to think and reflect about the work and to center ourselves around how to be most useful and helpful with the childcare providers and home visitors. And we also serve family, friend, and neighbor providers. So we have a full cohort of service settings that we provide mental health consultation in. We also have group supervision once a month in our small team. So a team of mental health consultants is usually about 8 mental health consultants paired with 1 supervisor is usually what a team looks like. There's some variability, and that group supervision takes place once a month as well. So this gives the opportunity for consultants to process cases that come up in the work and think through and get support from others. It's also the opportunity where we talk about administrative items too, because they all go hand in hand when thinking about reflective supervision. So that's a key piece of our model. And then we also almost always have a monthly book club going on, and we have often used equity DEI-based books to focus our readings on. Right now, we're reading my grandmother's hands, and that's been pretty evocative and an opportunity for consultants to think together about how racism and systemic racism has affected our communities. We also use every opportunity to get together. So our large team of about 60 to 65 staff get together at least twice a year. And we try to do those in person. And during the pandemic, we did do some virtual gatherings too, but we really do value the opportunity to come together in person, since we do have people from across the state that don't get to see each other very often. And it's usually a 2-day training where we often have DEI type presentations involved, but not every year. It just depends on what's going on. And then we give all of our mental health consultants the opportunity to enroll in the Harris Institute, which has an infant mental health certificate program. And this is a program talking about infant mental health on all levels, but this really helps give our mental health consultants background, because many, as everyone I'm sure that's attending today knows, that mental health training is usually about the lifespan and doesn't necessarily have a lot of information about infant mental health. So we do try to embed that with our consultants. Okay, next slide. Okay, although I was worried that I didn't say enough about how we support our supervisors to provide solid reflective supervision. So our supervisors, we train them on reflective supervision at the organizational level, at the Southwest Human Development level. We've recently started every other month half-day training session for all new managers at Southwest Human Development to get embedded with reflective supervision, because that's not a skill that necessarily comes naturally either. So we strive to support every manager or supervisor with solid skills in mental health. In reflective supervision. So that's new and happening. But besides that, every employee at Southwest Human Development receives a half-day training on reflective supervision too. So that's at the employee level of letting those who are going to be receivers of reflective supervision understand what they can expect from it. So that's part of our new employee orientation for all employees. And then at the mental health consultation, we do a little bit extra. We also strive to center anyone who wants to work in our Smart Support mental health consultation program in the idea of that we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion in this work, and that's a part of the work. So in our interviews, we hand everyone that comes in for an interview a copy of the diversity informed tenets. Many have not seen that document before, so we want them just to be aware that this is part of our ongoing work. We do the interview process. We ask a few questions that touch on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also reflective capacity. And then we typically, either at the first interview or the second interview, do a writing sample that's centered around the first tenet, which is self-awareness leads towards better services for families. We ask applicants to reflect on that tenet and how that has impacted their ongoing work. And that's at the interview process. So this is just getting people set up that when they start working for us, this is going to be part of our conversations. This is going to be part of our work. So that's at the interview process. Our new employee orientation, I already talked about that, centers also around reflective supervision. Again, I did mention our year-long Consult U program that helps consultants get trained and set up to provide good, solid mental health consultation. And then our primary tool really for ongoing professional development is ongoing reflective supervision. Again, that's on a weekly level. Of course, things come up occasionally, and sometimes it's not every single week, but that's our goal. That's what we strive for. All of these things are aspirational, and we know we fall short at times, but this is what we look to do and we strive to do at the program level and at the organizational level here in Arizona. Again, I spotlighted my grandmother's hands that we're currently reading across, both managers, supervisors, and consultants are reading it. One thing that really helped us, and I wanted to point out, is this book by Hardy and Bobes, Promoting Cultural Sensitivity and Supervision, a Manual for Practitioners. That book really is a deep dive, and we did that as a monthly book club for our supervisors and managers to reflect on, and it comes with reflective questions. And that really did help us start talking a lot more. So we did that. I think we did that around 2018, honestly, and that took us pretty far. So I would recommend that book. I also do, if you want to email me, I have a list of all of the book club books that we've used over the years. We've been doing this since 2010, so it's kind of a long list, but I'm happy to send that out as well if you are interested. I think I saw a couple questions about the book clubs come up, so I'm happy to do that. And that's it for my presentation of thinking about how we have done this in Arizona at Southwest Human Development and in our program of Smart Support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. This has been such great information. We are running a little bit behind time right now. And like I mentioned from the beginning, feedback from the field is really getting opportunities to practice having difficult conversation. And we want to honor that. So for my piece, I'm going to kind of go through it a little quickly just to give you some tips and tools to use when you go into this mock session. So when I'm done, Jordan is going to move you all into breakout rooms. You're going to go into a mock session where you'll get to practice having some of these difficult conversations with some people here. We do recognize that some people are here to watch and to listen and may not be able to participate given where you may be right now in your day. So when you are going into breakout rooms, we'll give you guys the opportunity to pick who's going to actually participate. And then the others of you would just be there to sort of observe and take notes. So please don't jump off and run away because we're hopping in breakouts. You definitely can still continue your day and participate. So what I'm going to run through here kind of quickly is research findings again from the field. It's consultants' voices. And these are the things that consultants are saying are really helpful for them to be able to advance equity. And these are things that they get from their reflective supervision and what their reflective supervisors could help them with. As Sherry and Leah spoke, when you think about the processes and perspectives of reflective supervision, the trainings, embedding it at the organizational level, making it a part of management, making it a part of commitment letters, and really getting the whole organization on board. It does provide a space for consultants to be able to advance equity and to have a space to reflect and share those experiences. And so what these findings will talk about are those experiences. I do recognize there's been some comments in the chat about differences between groups. So my study sample was predominant. It was actually half and half white and half Latino. And there was a couple, there was one Black participant, one Native American participant. I do recognize that these findings are unique to this sample. I do some work with Eva Marie Shiver. She's recently done a study where she's able to capture BIPOC experiences and center BIPOC consultants and supervisors. I would suggest you all take a look at that work as well so that you can see that the experiences of consultants are different based on their identities and their lived experiences. And so we respect that every sample may not be the case for every group. So did just want to preface that in my findings. And so the question that I asked consultants was, in what ways has your individual reflective supervision challenged you, their assumptions, and then their views about their consultees? And what came up was sort of 4 key things that supervisors do. And as you all go in your breakouts, think about these 4 key pieces here and how you could act some of these out and practice this. But consultants reported that their supervisors challenged their thinking and their understanding. Their supervisors actually raised the issues of equity, and equity goes beyond race and ethnicity. My consultants were able to bring up concerns that were happening with tribal programs, issues around gender, program type, working with different teachers, different directors and characteristics, and a long list of other equity issues. Sometimes we do get focused on racial equity, but there's a list of equity issues that supervisors can bring up. Supervisors provided opportunities to engage in those difficult conversations, and not even just opportunities to engage, but then again, opportunities to reflect on bias and racism. So these are just 4 key things I want you all to keep in mind as you're going into these breakout groups, and kind of think about the ways that you might be able to challenge thinking, raise some equity issues, provide some opportunities to engage in that conversation, and then again, to reflect. I'm going to share just some quotes that the consultants share. So these quotes come from challenging how their supervisor was challenging their thinking and understanding. Consultant stated, "It's her follow-up questions that helps me to challenge my biases, because then I do realize something. I'm like, you know what? I haven't thought about that. But now thinking about it, now that we're talking about it, I'm seeing something with this." Another quote was that she just kind of challenged me, did the whole tell me more about that, and just kept digging, which I know you all are familiar with these quotes. Again, this is another way to raise an issue about equity. So with the questions that she's asking me, it's broadened my perspective on certain things that are being shared, such as when I share how a teacher is cheating a child, she will ask me some challenging questions to see, like, where do you think that's coming from? Why do you think that's coming up for the teacher when the child is presenting those types of behaviors? So the question now in supervision are more challenging to gain an understanding of equity within the classrooms. So again, when you all go out into your breakout sessions, these are some of the questions you might be able to ask your mock consultant and supervisor. This is a quote from, again, Raising Equity Issues. One of the questions was, does it seem harder to have that talk because the teacher is a male teacher? So we talked about bias. She asked if it might be easier to talk about tone of voice if it were a female teacher. The fact that she asked and put it out there made it okay to really reflect on that and really think maybe there is something to that. And then lastly here, providing opportunities to reflect during supervision. Obviously, it's reflective supervision, so it seems like it would make sense that we're reflecting there. But as mentioned, we do have to build reflective capacity and functioning. So this one stated, yes, reflective supervision does challenge me depending on the questions that the supervisor is asking me. I do notice that, well, she's helping with being able to self-reflect, to reflect on the things that I'm sharing with her. And so these were some feedback that came, quotes that came out of the practicing. And then here's one about difficult conversations. What I'm really wanting and needing when moments come up, when we're faced with oppression or oppressive thinking or practices, is space to lean into those conversations and have uncomfortable conversations. And then lastly, before we move on, Jordan's going to take us into a scenario. And what I want you all to think about during this scenario is these 4 issues that came up, the ways that supervisors are able to communicate during reflective supervision with their consultants, and being able to think about how we can advance equity and everything, the trainings and the background experiences that consultants and supervisors are receiving. How does that look in actual practice? So I'm going to stop there, and Jordan, to give you the opportunity to get us over and break out so we can give these great participants some opportunities to engage in some of these conversations.
Sounds good. Thanks, Evandra. So now it's time for us to really just put into practice what we've discussed today. And our team has prepared a little scenario for you all to reflect on. This will be a sort of role-taking exercise between consultant and supervisor, which involves a consultant really describing their experience with observing bias in their work. And if you recall from earlier in this session, 83% of you had actually indicated that you had witnessed bias towards Black and brown boys in your work. And so we believe that this exercise will be very relevant to what you're all experiencing. I am going to put a link in the chat that goes over this scenario as well as the instructions for this exercise, if you all want to click on that now before we go into groups. And Evandra, you can go to the next slide. So before we begin, we would just ask that in your groups, you assign one person to be the consultant, one to be supervisor, and then one who will be the note taker for this session. And as you go through this session, we really want to encourage you to think about what we've discussed today about issues of equity at the systemic, organizational, and structural level. Really remain open and curious and challenge yourselves. So Sumia, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and split us into our groups, and then we'll reconvene in a few minutes.
And we're going to give you about 10 minutes.
Front end of these conversations.
We're responding. Welcome back. Well, we know folks are coming back, but we also recognize that our session ends in 2 minutes, and being very respectful of time, we wanted to kind of come back and get a sense of how your experiences were while you were away. We started out with the poll, and about 40% of you said you were somewhat comfortable having these difficult conversations. I hope part of that 40% were able to get some practice in having a difficult conversation about witnessing bias towards boys of color. But in this 2 minutes, like, let's use it. If anyone wants to report out from their group on the experience, maybe give about 30 seconds so we can get 2 people to share. If there's anyone. Someone definitely has to jump all in at once because we only have 2 minutes. I see in the chat, some of you wish you had more time. Go ahead, Rob, please share. I don't know if you're muted, Rob.
I'm off mute.
Oh, now I am.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think what was interesting was to observe even the discomfort in approaching the topic still in the brave participants that led in our group. It was the consultant spent some time building up the courage to talk about what they observed and not necessarily being able to label it right away, but then they did so. And even the supervisor kind of walking around it a little bit, but like starting to build up there. So it is interesting to see how it does take some measure of comfort and time to get there. And still there's, no matter how safe you are, there's still a bit of like hesitancy because you're not really sure how people are going to feel it. So I'm really proud of those who did in our group.
And thank you so much for Rob. And obviously in the spirit of consultation, we always want to build relationships and have safe space to even encourage these conversations. So you all were having this conversation with complete strangers. So I think what you said, Rob, is definitely important. I saw there was another hand up, but it went down.
It was me. This is Maria, but it was a little bit aligned to what Rob mentioned about the relationship. I'll just be conscious about sometimes a mental health consultant is new in the program or the teacher is new, so they need to build this relationship in order for them to be able to open up and be honest, and so for them to have this openly and openly and safe space conversation kind of thing.
Thank you so much. We're 1 minute over, so we appreciate you all. Please email us for more information. Hopefully we could get a part 2 of this together, but we really appreciate your courage and commitment to staying with us today. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.